tonight's event. And thank you for Sapient for hosting us. Just a quick show of hands, whose She Says event is this the first? Cool. Oh my gosh.
Wow, good.
Doesn't keep surprising me, we get new ones. But of course I've met some of you guys outside of a She Says event. Welcome. Does anyone want to know more about what She Says is about?
Yes.
Okay. So She Says is an organization that was set up back in the UK in 2007 by Ale Lariou and Laura Jordan Bambach. They're both digital creative directors in London. And they kind of got to a point where they were sick and tired of seeing each other, being the only two women being invited to speak on panels and judge at awards. So they're like going, there must be more than just us two. So they decided to form a group, start off with 5 people getting together on a regular basis, getting in speakers to talk about things that they didn't know about or things that would inspire them to be able to inspire others to excel in their careers. In 2008, Ali moved to New York, and she's like, well, it's only a year in, I'll just start a New York chapter. And since then, this is 2008, we're about 25 chapters globally, and we've kind of just grown by word of mouth purely. We've had no advertising whatsoever, but a lot of the things that we do has garnered a lot of momentum. And that's why when people reach out to us from a different city saying, hey, do you have a She Says over here? We're like, no, but do you want to start it? And so that's how we've kind of grown. Everyone sort of does their own thing in a way, because we say, look, you run it like Alcoholics Anonymous. You know your community better than we would. You can get inspiration from what the other chapters are doing, but you come up with your speakers, you come up with the events that you want to do, and you decide how often you want to do it. So that's kind of how we began. In New York, I'm one of the directors. We have a mentorship program called Who's Your Mama? Yes. Tongue in cheek there. We also have these events as much as possible. We try to do them on a monthly basis. We do have one in the pipe for the beginning of May. So for those that are on the mailing list, you'll be getting that email probably the middle of April. For those who are not on the mailing list yet, just sign up on weareshessays.com. and you'll be notified. We have the events, the mentorship program. We also have career management and recruitment. And I won't go into that detail right now, but if anyone has questions about that, they can talk to me later. I'm going to introduce you guys to Amy Cox, who is the Director of People Strategy here at Sapient Nitro. So again, thanks to Sapient for hosting us, and then I'll jump back in to sort of introduce the topic of the evening.
Great. So I'm Amy Cox. I'm the Director of People Strategy, which is a pretty fancy way of saying human resources here. It is kind of cool on LinkedIn. I get a lot of job opportunities that pop up for strategy, and I'm like, sounds great. I'm not qualified. So thank you all so much for coming. Welcome to Sapient Nitro. On behalf of the Sapient Nitro leadership team and in particular the Women's Leadership Network, we're really excited to have you guys here, and huge thanks to She Says for partnering with us and letting us host, especially on a topic that is very near and dear to the hearts of, I know, a lot of the folks here at Sapient, because it's something that comes up a lot. And it's personal brand is one of those things that people ask for advice a lot from either their mentors or from human resources or from their colleagues. And it's a little hard, I think, for folks to get their arms around it in a way that makes it actionable for them in a practical way. So I'm really excited about the topic, and I think everyone's going to probably really enjoy the discussion that follows. I wanted to kind of introduce our WLN. So the Sapient Nitro Women's Leadership Network is a global network. So it is a global initiative for us that extends into all of our global offices. And then we have chapters locally who operate on their own charter. So the chapter here is both from Sapient Nitro and Sapient Consulting. So we have some of our colleagues who sit up on the higher floors who are part of the Sapient Consulting Legacy Global Markets Organization. We work across the entire office here to put on some programming, to partner with outside folks to bring in some speakers, to run some mentoring events and things like that in the office. And so this is one of the goals that we had for ourselves this year, was to do more to bring the community in, to provide networking opportunities for our own WLN members. We're really looking forward to doing more with She Says over the course of this year, and hope that we have the opportunity to meet all of you at the next event as well, whether it's here or somewhere else in New York City. So wanted to also do a big shout out to Ralph Lauren, our client, who's actually hosting this event and sponsored the food and drink for us. We couldn't think of a better sponsor for our personal brand conversation. And also just to the team here, the WLN, the Women's Leadership Network team and colleagues of mine who helped pull it together. Wanted to make sure that we thank them as well. So I'll turn it back to you and look forward to the discussion and the reception afterwards. So thanks a lot,
Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah. So this sort of topic has been in the works for about a year and a half, 2 years. So at the beginning of the year, Jasmine and I are like, right, we're gonna make this happen. What are we gonna talk about? Okay. And Jasmine introduced me to Gemma, and I was introduced to Sanaa by another friend who she's married to now. And we're like, whoa, this is quite interesting. So when Jasmine started talking about, let's do personal brand, but let's sort of engage sort of that culture, the self-love thing, psychotherapy into it, I'm like, oh, I've got someone you need to meet. So that's how I introduced Sanaa to Jasmine. So this is how it's come to be. But before we get started, I'm gonna let our speakers introduce themselves. So you get a bit of a background, and then sort of dive right into this, how does self-love impact your own work and how you sort of brand yourself. We're at a stage now where so many of us are sort of figuring out, what am I? Who am I? What am I doing here? Do I want to sort of change tack? There's no longer the linear sort of career path, and many times we are sort of reevaluating ourselves. So these are going to be great people who can share some insights that they have, some of their learnings, and hopefully you can take with that wisdom and figure it out.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Sanaa, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I work here in the city. And I work with couples, I work with individuals, I work with small groups. I actually work with a lot of women, and so it's always really great for me to meet more women and to be able to have an interactive discussion about a lot of things that come up every day. Before getting into psychotherapy, I ran my own clothing line and contemporary line and high-end women's company out of New York. And after that, I transitioned into handbags. So, I've kind of, been in the branding sort of world for a very long time. And now I guess you would say I'm in personal branding in another fashion. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine Takanikos. I'm really happy to have you here. It's an honor always. I am a branding and marketing strategist. I've had my consultancy for about 8 years. I work with large brands, small brands, and I created a method called Brand Human, which I'm going to speak on a bit tonight, about what does this mean to personally position self, right? What does it mean to your community? What does it mean to your aesthetic values? What does it mean to your health? What does it mean to your relationships? And I have a global partnership with Soho House, where I present monthly in New York and bi-monthly in LA, and then kind of all over the world here and there. I'm an adjunct faculty member at Parsons, where I teach brand strategy for accessories design for continuing education. So that's me, and it's good. Nice to meet everybody, and thanks for coming.
Hello, my name is Gemma and Gambee. I am very honored to be here and be a part of this conversation. Very grateful to be here. I am a brand strategist. I am a trend forecaster, and I'm an educator. I teach at Parsons in the master's program, Masters of Branding. I teach luxury branding. I'm also a meditation teacher. So I don't think I've ever had a full-time job working at one specific place. I started branding, I consider, at 18 as a model, and I worked with all of the major luxury brands in the middle of the country, in Chicago and the Midwest. So I always think of myself as a piece of the branding. That's how I first started figuring it out. And then I jumped into luxury in Europe and was with one of the major houses there. And since I've worked with very large brands and very small brands, both in Asia, well, in Europe, Asia, and America. And yeah, so I balance passions for small startups with big, huge industry type of things. So that's a bit about me.
So before we get started, it's really important to know who's in the room for all of us so that we can address some of it. So we'd really be curious to know, why you're here, why this subject was interesting to you, and what sort of triggered, like what did it trigger? So if we could have some volunteers just answer that question, that would be really lovely. Yes.
Hi, I'm Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hi. It's very much like Alcoholics Anonymous. Not that I would know.
Personal branding has that, though. I mean, we're all dealing with like these big issues of what perception value we have. I mean, it's not dissimilar, right?
So true.
And I just read this thing the other day about, the only other place that people say users is in drug addiction, right? So we're looking at, in the digital age, this term that directly responds to addiction. So, hey.
Okay, moving right along.
Okay, moving on.
And traffic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm a brand strategist. I do the brand strategy for Ford Motor Company here in the Northeast at Team Detroit, which is part of WPP.
Okay.
I'm really looking to transition to a new role, and I've been recently thinking about starting my own consulting company on the side because I've been meeting a lot of really passionate people who have such a great idea for what they want to create, but they don't necessarily know about like the target market and exactly the right positioning for them. And that's been making me so much more excited than my typical role. And I feel like I'm in a place in my life where I would love to be able to create my own schedule and my own projects and really devote full time to what I'm really passionate about. And I was having a conversation with a female started media planning and buying and branding agency today, and we were saying how our days are very much structured in like a male-centric way. Like the way that the traditional workday and even the traditional school day is structured isn't one that really fits in with a female's needs. It's like clear that that was something that a male created, even like our highway infrastructure and different things like that. And I'm really interested in moving forward in my life in a way that makes sense with like my intuition and myself as a woman, but also that I can like do good and really make work happen in the advertising space, because that's been my passion for a really long time. So this like super resonated with me.
Cool.
And it was great to hear you guys.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to touch on all of
Yeah,
that.
that's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
How about you?
Hi, Meg. I work here at Sapient. I'm an experience strategist. The reason why I'm here is actually our WLN had an event a couple of weeks ago where they asked me to be part of a panel of 5 of us women, and one of the questions we were asked was about our personal brand, and I couldn't explain what that was. But what I could say, the one thing that I could say is, regardless of the type of work that I'm doing, like the project, the company, whatever, the one thing that has been constant, and I'm 27, so I've been working for like 5 years, like my career path I think has always been inspired and motivated by the people that I work with. So when I saw the word relationships in the body of this email, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I said in that panel, saying the people around me are 100% what motivate me, it's like the relationships. But the flip side of that is like, if I'm in a situation where I feel like that's not enough, I have to fight to like not shut down. So it's like, how do you balance like the people around you who inspire and motivate you with like what the other stuff would be? And so I'm kind of in that place where it's like, what is
Sure.
that stuff?
Cool.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm confused. What do you mean by other stuff?
Like the stuff that I'm passionate about that is independent of the people around me.
That is independent
Got
of
it.
the work that you're doing. That shows the dynamicism of person, right?
Yeah.
Like how are we
That's
dealing
my
with
whole
like
life. I totally understand.
how are we dealing with the position we're given and all the work that we want to do around that? Okay, cool. One more person? Yes.
Hi, I'm Ambika. 2 reasons I'm here. One is personally, I'm going through a bit of a like career growth moment and feeling growing pains around what my brand is and how to represent myself in an environment that's not necessarily used to young women. And the second is that my friend Jillian and I, / colleague now, have just started a women's organization at our company. It's called Gyro, down the road. It's an ad agency. And it's an interesting agency because for once there's women that are older than 30 in a building. And so we have women who are, in their early 20s and women who are in their 50s, all of whom seem to be struggling with this situation of being in a really male-dominant company. And so we're trying to bring a lot of programming about confidence and sort of like self-love in a looser sense, but confidence and how to position yourself and get the opportunities you want and ask for those raises. So we thought this would be a great learning opportunity.
I want to say one thing before I move on about sort of the masculine and the feminine, right? Because it can be interpreted a lot of ways, and we have two guys here, which is awesome. Thanks for coming, representing. The brand human methodology and what Amanda and I had really started talking about a year and something ago is this idea of that we can bring both the masculine and the feminine together with work, right? And when we do that, that's when we really thrive. And this idea of receptivity and also rules and logistics and they both sort of need each other, right? But we don't want to abandon one for the other within brand or branding or business, and that's or self, right? So it's an interesting thing to talk about because the more we talk about, the more we can discover how things are changing and shifting and how we're building new models. So, Gemma,
Yeah, I'm gonna start.
Do we have a
Clicker?
clicker?
Or whatever.
That's one thing that maybe.
For that?
I can sit there and do it.
Well, not yet, because I'm
Okay.
gonna start something first.
So tell me when, just give me
Okay.
a nod.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
am on there, I didn't know. She put me in there, that's so sweet. Okay.
That one? The wellness, yeah.
Oh,
We'll start
perfect,
with
yeah,
that,
oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't know
Having
you
a
could do
moment.
that.
Strategy.
Oh, okay. Well,
Deck
we
building.
talked about it, but I didn't know she was gonna actually do it. So tonight, I wanted to be able to offer meditation as my offering for self-love and relationships and relationship building. So, to speak to both of your points, there's something about knowing self and knowing what you want, right? What you want to bring to the world, what you want to contribute to your community. But then, that's super important. But then, in reflection to relationship, how that is, we have to see how our environment is responding to our wants and desires. Because sometimes we have wants and desires, and it's not going to fit through nature. Nature meaning the people around you and what they want, basically. So it's about managing what you like, what you want, your priorities, but seeing how the world responds to you. And if the world doesn't want it, sometimes you just have to kind of let it go. But it doesn't mean you have to let it go to the point where you don't have it in your heart anymore. But so knowing this and watching this and being okay with it, and like he broke up with me, oh my God, I want to like crawl on my back and cry for 3 days. Or, oh no, it's okay because that happens. This is kind of like the life things that happen, or I didn't get that job, or they didn't like the presentation, or whatever it is. But having this knowing to be able to let go of is so important. So the definition of wellness, this is something that we worked out together, which I love. Finding and trusting the knowing within. You know what feels right. Meditation builds a deep relationship to higher self, where your deepest, purest intentions is being radiated. So, Brandon, is a series of, should I read this?
Yeah, here we go.
Okay. So, basically, this knowing within is something that I visit on a daily basis, and I teach it to some of the amazing places in the city. So I thought that we could close our eyes tonight to get started and spend just about maybe 8 minutes. Yeah, probably only 8 minutes, so it's very short. So if there's any way that you want to go into meditation deeper, find out more, my website is available and you can email me with questions or figure stuff out. So here we go. Okay, go ahead and keep your feet hip width apart with your ankles right below your knees. And your knees in line with your hips. And give your sit bones a little bit of space so that you can allow your tailbone to not be squished and just sit very nicely on the chair. Yeah. Then you want your backs upright, but not uncomfortable upright. Just relaxed enough. Your hands can be just relaxed on your legs or cupped, folded here. Go ahead and close your eyes. If you have glasses on, slip those off. Close your eyes. Bring your chin down just a touch so the back of your neck is elongated. Go ahead and let your jaw start to relax. Meaning find that hinge where your lower jaw attaches to your upper jaw. Just see how you can loosen that up. And then go ahead and let your tongue relax and melt into the bottom of your mouth. I want you to start with your feet. Bring all of your attention to your feet. Meaning feel the soles of your feet touching the soles of your shoes. Really just feel what that feels like. Now move up to your seat. And stay very present with your seat. Feel your seat sitting on the chair. Feel your thighs sitting on that chair. Feel that connection. And then moving your attention up your spine, up your neck, to your head. I want you to start to feel your hair. Feel all the little individual hairs coming out of the hair follicles. See if you can really feel that. I want you to go ahead and turn your attention inward. And just land on your chest. And I want you to find your heartbeat. I want you to slow yourself down until you hear your heart beating. When you have thoughts and you notice you're thinking, I want you just to effortlessly shift your attention back to your beating heart. Bring your attention back to your head. Back down your spine. Back to your seat. Back to the soles of your feet. Now bring your attention to the people sitting around you. Take a moment just to feel their energy. Listen to their breathing. Just be with them for a moment. then when you're ready, in your own time, you can go ahead and let your eyes come open. That was teeny tiny, but the whole point is committing to a regular meditation practice allows you to build a relationship with self. And the relationship with self is where it all starts.
The reason why I've brought meditation into my work is because I notice the difference of how present you become when you close your eyes for a moment. Right? So regardless of my personal opinions and how meditation helps my work and helps my presence, it's really interesting to see how you start to become grounded, right? When you take a moment. So thank you, Gemma. So Sana's going to talk about self-love in relationship to her work. And can you read one more slide? Oh, one more slide.
So, in order for me to speak coherently on self-love, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of separate these two words, right? Self and love, because I believe there are two different things. Right? When I think of self-love, I think about self-acceptance. Self-love as a term kind of strikes me as maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, maybe a little ironic, because self points to ourselves, it points to ego, selfhood. And I know that when we're here, surrounded by media, the idea of narcissism comes up a lot, right? And here we're talking about self-acceptance, which is looking at yourself not from a place of fear, from a place of being open. Right? And love, the other part of it, is about humanity. And that's huge, it's sweeping, it's all encompassing. Right? The goal of self-acceptance is more clear, I think, than the term self-love, because it's sort of a call, right, to accept yourself the way that you are. Not just all the parts of yourself that you really like, but the parts of yourself that are difficult even for you to accept. The good parts and the bad parts too. Right? Only when we see both of these parts can we feel, a little bit confident, or at least start to feel a little bit confident, even when we're here among people we might know, or among friends, at work, among colleagues. So I want to move from there to another really important piece, which is self-doubt. And I want to open it up a little bit and ask all of you, right, who here has self-doubts?
The world.
Good, really honest, I like that. So does anybody want to share? Nothing too personal, but, what do some of those self-doubts look like? Anyone?
I mean, I'm going through a career change, so there's a lot of just self-doubt, and I put myself out there, and sometimes you get a rejection, and it's separating your worth versus what they're looking for specifically, or it could just not even be real, but that's coming up a lot.
Yeah, that's hard. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Yes.
Just like working as a journalist and writing every day and like kind of feeling like, do I really belong here, or everyone on my team is a better writer than I am? It's just always that constant. It's like, since you're writing every day, it's that constant feeling of like, am I supposed to be here? Or did they just let me in because whatever, whatever lie that I want to tell myself.
So imposter syndrome. Right? I mean, everyone has that, and everyone wonders whether they're the only ones. So self-doubt is important, right? Self-doubt has its place, and by experiencing it, wondering if we're good enough, wondering if somebody else is going through this, wondering if we're worthy, right? We kind of discover, and all of these questions that you ask, they point inside to the things that we actually value, right? We value work, we value creativity, the ability to do something, the ability to have somebody else want us as part of the team, right? So it speaks to some of our deeply held beliefs. Now, accepting yourself doesn't mean that you're going to appear perfect to yourself, not at all, in fact, right? And we actually don't want that. And I've included Brene Brown's quote here to point out that the pursuit of perfection in and of itself is completely inauthentic, right? It is our capacity to be vulnerable that has a lot of power to it. And she says, right, if you trade in your authenticity, you'll experience a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. In my work, people come in and in therapy they talk about their self-doubts, right? And that there is inherent power in speaking about these self-doubts is almost immediately evident, right? To be able to speak about something that's a part of yourself from a position of, hey, yeah, I'm gonna own this too. This is also part of me. So whether it's kind of in a small group, I have, groups for women who are founders and that are starting their business or they've started it, and they come and they, start to talk about like the confidence and assertiveness issues, a lot of things that we've been talking about. They have a really strong voice, but in a way, they themselves can't hear that voice anymore for how strong it is, right? For how important it is. It's drowned out by things like media, things like the culture that we live in, even by their friends, by work environments that are not incredibly supportive. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort to be gentle and self-accepting again, but it is possible. I've seen it happen over and over again. And I want to kind of move now to the second part of the term love. And again, I want to ask you, why do you think love is important to the idea of self-acceptance? Love like relationship.
Relationship love with others or with yourself? Because personally, I feel like if you can't truly love yourself, you aren't completely able to love other people. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't start with you and accepting your flaws and accepting everything that makes you who you are, can you really love others? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Can you?
I don't think so.
Okay. What about relationship love? How is that important? Any kind of relationship, right? Who's a really good friend, a partner, your sister.
Oh, empathy. I think to really love someone, you have to put yourself in their shoes, and I think the same goes with your own self-doubts, is to see yourself from another person's view, because when I acknowledge some of the self-doubts I have, my friends and my husband is like, are you crazy? And then they reflect what they see, and I think their empathy helps me through difficult times.
Yeah, how does it feel when you get that?
Powerful.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Yeah. Anybody else? Different experience? Similar? Yeah.
I feel like love is also like one of the more true things that you can experience in life.
Mm-hmm.
So your job, your clothes, the things you own, like all of that is just like temporary, whereas when you have love, that's something that's really, I don't know, it surpasses all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. That's really great. Anybody else? Yes.
I think when you have relationships with other people, you put up with different things, so you put up with the good and the bad. So if you can do that with other people, then you can do it yourself and reflects back.
Yeah. Yeah, all of these things, right? Exactly, all of these things. Right. And it comes up, I do couples counseling as well, and it comes up in couples counseling. A good relationship helps you find yourself. And you find yourself, and then you're able to, you're saying, accept other people too. Right? It challenges you to be better, to have that one person that you can trust and be vulnerable with, right? And show the good sides, show the bad sides, right? To like the flaws as well as the parts of you that you really like, right? That kind of flows into boundaries for me a little bit, because boundaries come up a lot, right? But in the context of a good relationship, a relationship to somebody else, and in the context of work, right? What happens when you have that person that you
just trying things that you never thought you would.
Yeah, it's great.
You feel like you have a sounding board, so that you don't automatically react. You have people to put that onto and to give you some feedback to actually make a sound decision or a sound conversation when you have those conversations. So kind of be that sounding board for you.
Yeah, having someone who is there as a sounding board means that when you are at work, right, you're not bringing all that stuff with you, right? The stuff of I'm not sure if I can do it, or I'm really upset about this, right? These are all great emotions. They define who we are, right? But when you're at work, you're then you're able then to set the boundary. You're able to say no, right? The way that I define boundaries is that you're sort of corralling the safe space within which you can do really great work, right? Which also means that if you've got that person you can call or text, or you meet with them and say, this is how I felt about everything that happened today, right? That means that you're not then bringing it to work. And work becomes a place where you can be creative, frees you up, right, to do that work without sort of the pain, the drama, the suffering that comes along with it, right? It creates balance, and you can focus on your work. Now, having all this, right, knowing and accepting yourself, it doesn't make you automatically, you wake up tomorrow and feel like you're this amazing person, right? It points to your flaws just as much as it points to your strengths, right? Acceptance is also about accepting your flaws and the failures, and that's really important. And then taking that information and sharing that insight with the right people, the people that you can trust. So what's the point of all this? What's the point of self-acceptance? What's the point of loving a relationship? What's the point of setting up boundaries? What's the point of creating a safe place for yourself at work? So what happens when you detach self from love? It brings us to know thyself, but love thy neighbor. Right? It's not love yourself, but also love your neighbor. It's know thyself, but love your neighbor. Because the end goal of all of this is what? Compassion. Right? And they talk about this in philosophy, they talk about it in all of the different faiths and religions and all these big ideologies. Right? Our goal is to be there to support one another, to truly be compassionate towards one another. Right? So self-acceptance eventually leads to accepting the other, right? Because we realize we're flawed, we're also really cool, and other people are that way too. Right? It's kind of terrifying. Right? It's also really interesting, and it's kind of like the meandering journey kind of leads maybe to that point. So after that, what happens? You know deeply who you are. Also know deeply how you are. Right? What have all of those values shown you about yourself? And try to be good. Try to be moral. Right? Learn how your values speak to you. Do the right thing. Research shows that true happiness is about disengaging from the self, from me, from I, from myself, right? And being involved in something much bigger than ourselves by giving, charity, offering help to other people, supporting other people that you care about, lifting other people up, being engaged in work that pulls you outside of yourself, right? Pulls you outside of yourself and attaches you to this bigger cause, whatever it is, health, the earth, the world, your creativity, this big thing that you're going to do, right? Always seeking to find that big thing outside of yourself, the way that you're going to change things. Using your skills for good, and that kind of love, the egoless love, right? That comes back to us in spades.
Right.
Any comments about that? Anything? Yeah.
Well, everything you say is, I can't not agree with it, and it's logically makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
However, if you open up the newspapers, if you see New York, if you walk up Park Avenue, these aren't the things that are really happening in our society, and these aren't the things that these people are they're not looking to do good. In fact, they're trying to be manipulative, So, how do we reconcile those two things?
Reconciling the outside world.
Yeah, with the right path.
Our own right path.
Mhm.
Yeah, what do you think? How do we
What
do
do I
that?
think?
Yeah.
I think it's really confusing, because how do these people live with themselves? I mean, that's a good, and, of course, you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and you could say, well, they just want to be rich, they want to be that, but, is that,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to look very far to find a lot of suffering, right? There's a lot of suffering out there in the world. It's a really good question. And it's something I think that we, as we engage with the world, we kind of keep these things in our mind as well, right? And it brings us to, well, are we doing good work? Are we accepting ourselves for who we are? But then also trying to figure out, well, how does what I'm doing fit into the big picture? How am I doing my own little thing, my own little way?
I think that's actually a nice bridge to my conversation as well. Beth, can you pull up the other presentation, would you mind? Because what I'm going to talk about tonight is vibratory resonance, this idea of what you attract, who you attract, why you attract it. And I'm not going to tell you, and Amanda, you might want to just move next to the computer, because there's a lot of slides I'm going to have you.
Cool, I'll be here.
If you want to sit too, I don't want you to be uncomfortable with it.
Speakers.
Well, it's my soundtrack.
dance.
I'll stay here.
Okay, so Brand Human, as I touched on before, is a methodology that is constantly evolving because it's highly meta. It's like what I'm going through, what I'm thinking about, what my community is teaching me, what I'm learning from different people that I'm around, the people in the audience who come to my work who help my work. But right now I have about 31 principles within the Brand Human work, and those principles will vary, and I'm going to go through some tonight so you can see what I'm talking about. And I build themes around those principles based on real-time content that I feel is important that we should talk about. So I am in no way sort of counteracting personal branding. I'm bringing a new way to think about this idea. And I don't use the term personal branding too often, because to me it's associated with best practices, and that's in no way what I'm talking about. I don't believe there's 10 steps to build your Twitter profile or followings. Like, I think all of that is rhetoric. So we're going to talk about more, feeling your way through brand and how does it feel, right? So just say that, again, I don't like to lecture. I like to really involve you, and I come at this work from my own experience, so it's real, not making things up. It's what's happened to me. And recently, I've had some really close friendships, not really work anymore. When I say work, there's a lot of levels to that, but it made me really start to think about community and connections and how we connect and why we're connected and how we start to think about how we're connected and who supports us and who doesn't, and in this conversation and in this bridge between brand and wellness. So one of the first principles of Brand Human is this idea of alone. So, community is so highly important, right? They're our sounding board. Sanaa just talked about that and how important it is to see the mirror of self and to get that, or your feedback was around that. But to really build self and define self, right, we actually need to leave that sometimes, right? So that can be through anything that works for you or makes sense when you're alone, and that does not mean being on Twitter, and that does not mean texting, and that does not mean being on your phone, but when are there any moments within your lifestyle are you truly taking a step back and looking at yourself and being with self? It's really highly powerful, right? Because then we actually can then defend our ideas from a more centered place because we've thought about it, and we don't just have 20 opinions circling around in our head, right? The second is this idea of love of self, which we're talking about today. You're here because you respect yourself enough to learn, to think outside the box and to grow, right? But that's highly important in brand development and personal development. Building story through direct experience versus making it up because you want someone to engage with you. So, we live in a highly curatorial age, and that's great, and it's important, and it's certainly important when we build brands. But what are we actually experiencing? What is actually happening versus what you need someone to comment on or engage with? Amanda? Are we adding value at all times? And this is what Sanaa sort of ended with, right? Why are we doing this, and who is it serving? Who is it helping? Why are we putting content out into the world? And how is it affecting others, right? And if it's not affecting others, should it be? Have we thought about it? Have we sat with it? And how are we truly building brand from a place of genuine value? The idea of curation, this is going to mean something different to every single one of you based on how you engage with your networks. But we do have to curate self to a degree, because then we're living conscious, intentional lives, which then build something that people do care about, that you care about, right? So are you curating, and how is that working for you, and online, offline, on every level? Aesthetic integrity, do you have it? Do you need to work on it, right? Aesthetics really affect us, right? What is your aesthetic integrity? What is your design sensibility? Have you made time to work on what that looks like? Is there a consistency to it? Does there need to be? Is there a color theme? Does there need to be? Right? Like, how are you shaping things through your aesthetic and through your skill set? And I see in my work, I work with a lot of small business owners, entrepreneurs, like high-level executives, so all these different levels. And from my students and from the people I consult with, I see archetypes of fear in almost everyone, and including myself, right? But this idea of judgment, that you'll be judged all the time for what you put out there. Yes, absolutely. Like, you're judging me as I'm up here, but then you're also forgetting about what you just judged 2 seconds later. I'm judging you sitting here. We're all judging all the time. So knowing that and actually sitting with that about how it actually doesn't really matter, that judgment around the content you build and what you end up building, if you've consciously gone through these steps of what you're going to be and you feel good about it. Does it really matter what popular opinion says, right? And you start to think about it, and you start to sit with it, and it's sort of, no. So tribes, I'm gonna, again, just quickly touch on these for the time. So I like to think about tribe within the idea of building brand in self around who you really actually want to be around. Who do you want to surround you? Who do you care about? And how are they sort of archetypes? And how do you break them down in behaviors versus the idea of someone? Do you actually know someone who would be that archetype for you, and are they real, right? Is Jennifer real and living, and she has all of these different behaviors that you can then model your strategy from? And she can help actually activate your own strategy, whether it be your business or your personal brand or where you want to go, because you understand what's important to her and her content, the content you should be feeding her, right? So I find it helpful to put it into a real person when you're thinking about tribe. The company you keep, same idea. These people that you surround yourself around are what you become. So do you need to start to look at habits? Are you having the same conversation with that same girlfriend who's wanted a boyfriend for 4 years, having drinks every Thursday night? How is that actually feeding your work? Or is it depleting your work and depleting self? Having enough respect for yourself to know that your time might be better served elsewhere now, right? And you do not have to do it in a cold way, but it's a valuation of consistently thinking and looking at your life and being present in your life about how people affect you. And toxicity. Yes?
How do you tell that person nicely that you're walking away?
So that's in here. I'm gonna go back to that.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Hashtag bye. Hashtag we're not hanging out anymore. Yeah, you just do it on social media and it's no problem.
We do that nowadays, right? It's clear to everyone.
Right. So, and then there's this idea of boundaries, which Sanaa talked about as well. I have a whole workshop on boundaries alone and brand. But the idea of when do you send emails? How late do you send emails? Do you use Boomerang for Gmail so you can manage how people respond to you? Do you think about how you push out your content on Instagram and when you start to, is it late night? Are you looking for engagement past 11 a.m.? Right? What is that? Because that is all creating personal self. That is all creating brand. That's all creating how you're hired, how you're perceived, especially if your networks are open. So starting to understand that these kinds of boundaries that we may think is like thoughtless or just no big deal, we're creating our future now with this stuff. Okay? Sphere of influence, I'm gonna kind of skip across that, but quickly, I think of sphere of influence as someone who will actually pick up the phone when you're talking about brand and self. I don't think about it as your 1,500 followers on Instagram. Okay, especially with the work of algorithms and the fact that these are businesses when we're pushing out content. They're not there to serve us in sphere. Okay, we all know that. Especially there's so many strategists in the room, we're working on that daily, right? So truly knowing your people, how many people will actually pick up the phone for you? It gets smaller and smaller, right? How many people actually see your feed and care and would share your content or would help build your message? Not that many people when we dial it down, right? But if we know that there's only 10 people, we can start with those 10 and we can nourish and we can build from there, and that 10 can become 20, right? Because they're more intentional and they're present and they care about your work.
And be reciprocal to that.
Reciprocity, right? So, what makes your network work, and how do your connections and relationships function and affect you and brand? I ask you this question. You can sit on it, think about it, but when you say work, it means sort of how does it function? How do relationships truly shift and build and move your work? And why brand human? Because the profound rests in the obvious. The more work I do as a strategist and as an educator, the more I dial back down to things like the idea of presence. Period. So you may be sitting here being like, well, that's obvious. Well, really think about it and see how much you actually activate that obvious stuff in your life. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah, the idea is obvious.
Yeah.
The action is something totally different.
So you can read this quickly, but I've been playing with the golden ratio in relationship to brand. And I'm about this much into it, but it's really fun and really cool. How many are you familiar with the golden ratio? Okay, cool. So it's kind of in everything that works and functions and has beauty to it. It's there, it's present in it, right? And if you break it down, it's got a lot of different arms and mathematics, but I really like this idea of what vibrates and what attracts when you think about brand, right? And how you attract things and how, if you're this tuning fork, you can move to the next slide. If this idea of body, brand, and tuning fork happens, ideally, you're always attracting what you need, and you always have what you need, right? But we can't actually function in that way all the time because we live in New York City, which brings me to my second point, right? Well, let's move past that. Of interference. So, been starting to again scratch the surface of what is interference mean to attraction. So if I'm out there looking for my ideal man, right, and I really want this ideal relationship, and I'm constantly thinking about meditation or I'm in yoga and I'm bringing back to balance, no matter what, I'm always trying to bring back to balance and ideal vibration, so I attract this person, right? Great, but what around me is affecting that if we talk about relationship, right? So, go ahead and move that. We want to talk about the Wi-Fi a little bit. So, an astrophysicist did this illustration to show us what would New York City look like if we looked at the Wi-Fi signals around us. Right? And this is a big, big point, so I'm just going to touch on it. But we have so much interference in this city, right? And we still have these magical moments where a person I met, she says years and years ago, is like, hey, I'm here and I've been on Instagram and she's awesome and she's totally a person I would love to reconnect with, and she came, right? That's a magical, awesome thing that happens, right? But it requires a lot. It requires us being on social together. It requires the newsletter if she says. It requires her being able to leave her job in time. There's a lot of factors in this cool meeting again, right? But we have to constantly think about that we have this interference in the city. So how are we bringing ourselves back to center, and how are we thinking about brand as intention? All the time to attract what we need, attract what we want, and build the careers we want, and to be around the people we're into. True value is nourishing, and growth comes from synchronicity. This cannot be attained fluidly from the lifestyles we're living without strategy and assessment. So that's the kind of key point of what I'm saying. I want to be clear that this, I do talk a lot about quality versus quantity, because I don't believe big numbers really mean anything, both to brands or to people. I think that there is a lot of missing ROI in these big numbers that brands tend to miss, but I also respect that certain people think that they're really key. But with people, right, this is really about, what is actionable and how you relate to others, right? What can you actually do to implement these things and to think about them? How many of you are familiar with Scott Galloway? Okay, I encourage all of you, especially since you're in advertising, to know about him. He's an incredible professor at NYC School of Business, Stern. He is an analyst and a strategist, but he recently gave a talk where he really showed you that it's not really possible in this economy to be a millionaire any longer. And again, I'm touching on this, but it is possible to be a billionaire. And if we look at our economic sort of, where we're at in the economy, where we're moving into these entrepreneurial models, even within agencies, even more important within agencies, we think this way. So we add tremendous value to our agencies, right? So they can create new models for the client. That's interesting to think about the growth model as a person, that we're in this really big time of scale and growth. And it's a tipping point, right? So whenever, we all know Malcolm Gladwell's work, but whenever we're in the point of tipping over, that means all new models. That means all new ways of being and thinking. So this is big work, big risk, and a big time for all of us. So a couple questions for you. So how many of you, if I ask you if you're over-networked, would you raise your hand immediately? A few of you. How many would say, I need more people in my network, I don't have the right people in my network? Okay. So we're going to talk about evaluating both of those things a bit. For those of us that feel over-networked, and I bet a lot of you actually are, and you're not thinking about it the way I'm thinking about it, because it's this idea of we're always adding more people into our networks, right? We're really focused on, who added us, and who, right, more friends, and more, versus the nourishing what we have, and are a lot of the answers right in front of us, and have we, missed that? So, your evaluation point, what does it feel like? How do you know when you have enough for the time being until you can articulate that new need? So that's when you're over-networked. When, if you say, I don't know what I need, I just need more, you probably are over-networked, right? Because you probably have it right in front of you and you haven't done this work of evaluation of community and network. And that may seem cold, this idea of evaluation, maybe seem too analytical or logistic. That's not what it is. It's really about self-care. Who is around you? What are the threads? What is happening? So you're searching for something new in people, but you can't articulate your need. And people that are close to you often feel neglected. Sometimes they deserve it. And you have too many emails that have dropped off without intention. And when I say sometimes they deserve it, I'm being funny. But what I mean is that sometimes you've got that person that you're having drinks with every Thursday night, and they're not evolving. Thus affecting your evolution. And when are you really kind of not caring for yourself by caring for someone who doesn't care for them? themselves? And where does that boundary start to affect you? Some of you are in need of this cultivation of community, right? And the cleansing of your sphere. So who do you want to know on a deeper, more significant level? You can ask yourself, who within your close relationships need tending to? And building out the dynamic landscape of your people, what is your ask? And is there toxicity present? And what are the actions you need to take to shift this? Generating community. You know your ask if you want to generate more community. And that has to do with reciprocity as well. What are you going to offer when you have the ask? Right? What's going to be the relationship there, and how is it set up? But you know you need different community or new community. You really know what that looks like for you. And you've dug deep and you've looked at the other principles, and you can make a smart decision from a place of presence. Okay, so that's it. Any questions around that one? No, it's a lot to absorb.
Brain dump.
Yeah, I wanted to give you tonight kind of a lot to ruminate on, right? And usually what happens with my work with Brand Human, because there are a lot of principles and each principle has different lectures, whatever comes up immediately is what you usually need to think about and work on, right? So it's it's a lot to absorb and digest, but I would just encourage you guys to do that with an open heart and curiosity versus judgment, right? That, oh, that's coming up and maybe I need to look at it, and that's great. It's a place to improve and evolve. Oftentimes I feel like the personal branding conversation is kind of rooted in something is wrong, right? And rooted in you must change to get to a certain thing. Or maybe it's just like, oh, I've noticed it and this is like, I'm gonna have fun with this and build around this and build into this a bit more. Because we're just not in a time where we can ignore how we personally feel about things for our career. There's just not room for it in the same way. Yes?
Again, I agree with everything you say, and I think that maybe we have come to a tipping point, and maybe somebody like Kim Kardashian is the tipping point. Because if you go through all what she stands for, or what I assume she stands for, is oftentimes manipulative. It's physical as opposed to mental. But she definitely has a brand.
Yeah. I mean, the Kim Kardashian point, I think we have to be really careful as women to not like Kim Kardashian. I'm just going to be honest.
To what?
As women.
To like her?
To not like her.
To not like her.
And
So
to
I
be
should
heavily critical of her. I'm just going to give my opinion on this. Because she's actually made a lot of really smart business decisions, but what she means to our culture is just what Playboy meant or Hustler has meant to our culture. It's just another form of that. So, you can look at all the people that
was
follow
published
her.
by men, though.
But, she has males on her team, but I think that there's to look at that, I think from your question before and your question now, I think those are all valid points, right? And it's all about perception. So it's what you choose to focus on, right? You can focus on the people that you find to be evil on Park Avenue, because they're there, or you can focus on other things, right? But it's where we put our focus and attention and that's what grows.
Oh, no, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. I'm looking at it, taking a step back. No, I don't I think the Kim Kardashian thing is kind of interesting because she has the brand thing down. I mean, she has a huge following. She's done all the things it has gotten, but, I don't know if she's a happy person. I mean, if that's the goal. I mean, it seems to me that the stuff that you're talking about is we're moving toward authenticity. I don't particularly think she's authentic. I'm not saying I'm
it's hard
judging
to know.
her.
It's hard to know.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's very hard to know when someone is so highly curated, right? What is happiness? I recently said someone, was talking to me about this. Like, I don't really believe like happiness is something that happens all the time. Like, what is it? Is it, you want to have your heart broken so you know what it feels like to be human. So is she truly happy, right? In that question alone, like, does it matter?
Well, happy to me equals authentic, like somebody
Okay.
like Nora Ephron, who with, had her heart, and she was really successful.
Yes.
And she's pretty cool, I
But
think.
a lot of people hated her. I just read an article today, people feared Nora Ephron on a major level that worked with her and had respect for her but could not relate to her and didn't actually think she was authentic. And there was someone who just said that. So again, perception, right? That's all it is. And it's sort of like, that's the archetype that you relate to more for your value set, and you need to know. That's good to know, and that makes total sense. I think that makes total sense. But
And in the end, tipping points are continuous.
Yeah.
There's always another tipping point. The only thing that's consistent in the world is change. So in the end, we're never gonna figure it all out, and there's always gonna be a yin and a yang. There's always gonna be what you perceive as ugly and what you perceive as wonderful. It just really comes down to your own self-choice of what you want to curate in the world. What are you bringing into the world? And from where are you bringing it?
like, you're not going to start just taking selfies all the time, right?
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not. You're not going to move into.
Are you
that.
gonna go get plastic surgery
Right,
and
and
have
then-
like a
yeah.
Snapchat
Oh
of it?
no!
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm into realism.
That would be, that's the mirroring effect of that kind of stuff, right? And because she has influence, there's mirroring effects, right? And you can argue that it's damaging, or you can argue that it's not, but
Yeah.
I
but
think,
what's
I think we though, in general, have to be careful about how we feel about her and how we express it, just because it can be damaging, it feels like a little bit to me, but that's just my own. Any other questions around Brand Human? Yes?
This is related to Brand Human, but it's also this thoughts and conversations I've been having with friends. So I'm friends with a lot of really hardworking, ambitious women, and I have one friend in particular. She has a pinned tweet on her Twitter profile that says, like, each year it's like 3 more years until I make Forbes 30 under 30. 2 more years if I make, like, every year for the last 3 years. It says like X amount of years until I make this list. So I guess for her, success means being recognized in that way, whether it's being asked to be on a panel or being in a Forbes 30 for 30. But I guess the conversation I want to have with this audience is, what does success mean to us? Like, when will we be able to say that we're successful? What does that mean? And should we even have a goal of success?
I mean, I think all of us can talk about that. I mean, I would say that because I'm going through my own growth of like what that means to me with Brand Human, and I think that you are naturally a person where press is really important, right? Like, we all have our different love languages. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about what that means, right? And so for some of us, it's recognition only, right? And it lays in recognition. So success, it doesn't matter how much money we're making if someone doesn't write about how awesome we are, right? So again, you determining what it means for you and letting her maybe affect that, like knowing that for her love language is making Forbes 30 under 30, right? And she may do it because she keeps saying it. Because oftentimes when you say it, you end up becoming it, right? That's just sort of the law of nature. But I mean, does anyone else have a comment around what success means to them, or do you guys want to share any?
Yeah, and success, that word, it crops up a lot. And I think that in many ways it's one of those things which is like kind of a red herring. Like, we use it so much that it's kind of completely devoid of any kind of meaning, right? It's like happiness, right? What we actually mean is contentment, because we're pursuing happiness, then what are we actually pursuing, right? It's not inherent in the definition of the word. It's like absolutely not clear. Same thing with success, right? I think that a lot of times people will look at it and say, well, actually what I mean is my values. So what is important to you to do in your life, right? Work-life balance. Do you want to have, create a really comfortable atmosphere for your family, right? Is that what you want to do with your life? Like, that's really tough, right? Do you want to cultivate, strong relationships? Do you, want to start an organization? Whatever it is, right? Success might need to be dismantled, and might need to look at might need to look at values, might need to look at, what is actually important for you to do, and also to ask why, right? Why is that important for you to do?
That's really powerful, yeah.
And I think success for me comes down to something really simple, it's just gratitude. And I think the minute that we are comparing other people's successes or other people's halves to, without coming back to your own sense of your own goals of what success is for you. Like, if it's successful for you to go to the store and make a pie on a Friday night, and you do it, then you're grateful you're successful in that moment. So in the end, my own practices, I set up my own certain goals for myself that mean success for me, the things I want to accomplish. And in the morning, I think of what I'm grateful for that I've done and I've taken action for accomplishing those goals. And it just brings me a great sense of success, like personal success.
That isn't to say though, and I think one of your really important points is that how are you affected by that, right? Like these very powerful women around you and you're powerful women, how are you affected by other people's goal sets that they're publicly announcing, right? And I certainly don't have the answer to that, but I encourage you within Brand Human to, again, start to look at these principles more and feel your way through it, you know? And if you're around people, again, that instead of encouraging you are providing toxicity around that stuff, you have to look at that, right? And sometimes that happens where there's too much competition in your circle, there's not enough support. And I'm not saying that's what's happening with you, but that can happen. We live in a city where it's you know, there's a competitive nature to everything, right? We're all here because we believed in ourselves and we wanted to get to a certain place, and we're continuing to get to a certain place. That's what New York City draws to it, right? So finding that it really, like what Sanaa said about your value set, like how is success or contentment defined for you? Because that's all we can really do, right?
So it totally resonates with me that you need to be able to separate what other people are doing and stop comparing yourself, and it's definitely an ongoing practice, especially in this city, for sure. Mm-hmm. But how do you envision like the goal and the success that you want without letting other people like influence that picture? Because for me, at least, like just coming from my background as like an only child of immigrant parents, it's difficult to like shape my own path of like what I think the best, most successful picture is going to be without letting like other people's success and other people's like shining at moments influence that. So I find it hard to draw that myself.
Yeah, I want to say that like you're very self-aware to understand like that where you came from influences who you are, right? Like, yeah, awesome. But you know, I think that it's like you said, it's a constant thing to think about within building brand, because you don't want it to make any decisions. And maybe Sanaa can talk more about an exercise around that, or something, if you want to say something on that. But I think for me, you know, having the time alone and having meditation practice and also really looking at the competitive landscape, like I really, in gratitude, I really encourage understanding what's around you instead of having any fear around it. Because when you understand what's around you, you can be confident in what you're putting out there. And you know, for me, I've entrenched myself in the world of personal branding, and I've had to listen to, you know, Nirvana and someone tell me about brand and Nirvana and pumps in the air, and that's not what I want. It's how I want to spend my time. But I'm going to do it because I respect the people that are in this space talking about it, right? And then I can know that my work is centered in something that comes from a place of knowing what's around me. So that can actually really help, is doing a comparative study and living in that way where you face it straight on and know that like, it's cool, you know? Or, oh wow, you just really inspired me. That's incredible. I want to do better work, right? Those two things can happen. And they're both big in the way that, you know, growth is big. That you're, you know, and that the conscious collective is there, right? What I say, someone else says, and what, you know, and so it's all there anyways, right? So to fear it or to let it really affect you intensely is kind of, it can go away if you start to think about it that way a little bit more. I mean, not go away completely, right? But, okay. Do you want to say something, Sanaa?
Sure. You were talking a little bit about being first-generation immigrant. I think that it's such a huge group, right? And it's this, I special place in my heart, right? And I work with a lot of people specifically because of that. And you know, it's kind of understanding
we're gonna have to wrap up now. So we can leave 10 more minutes for people to have chats, conversations, have quick conversations or questions that you have for the speakers here. But again, thanks for those that came. Thank you to the speakers.